Hello everyone, hope you all are doing great. And today in this new video series, we are going to be creating this new uh, notes app or to-do list. You can call it whatever. Basically, it's a to-do list that has folders, and basically you can have each folder can have its own list. Okay, so basically let me show you first the app, and then I'll show you how we're going to build this. And this is really exciting, for me, because this uses some of the really uh, high level concepts on how to better structure your code and uh, how to distribute and decouple your code so you can make much of your app reusable. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing, but let's go ahead and take a look at the app itself first. So basically what we're going to have is a list of folders where you can organize your it can be your list, like anything. For example, you want to go grocery or personal or work, or I'll add another one, maybe uh, workouts, right? So uh, just any list, and then when you go inside that list, each list is gonna have its own items. So you can add maybe uh, get bread. um, and then workouts does not have anything, so let's go ahead and basically add something. So we can add push-ups, maybe treadmill, something, right? And so each list is gonna have its own items. Now you also have option of removing an item. Okay, and you can even remove the entire list. Okay, and rest of the stuff is this navigation and stuff like that. So this is the app that we're going to be building. And I know, it's not a lot. You may feel like it's just a simple to-do list app, but there's a lot that is going on behind the scene, and I want to show you, and talk about the learning objectives from this video series. So let's go ahead and talk about those. So first of all, we're going to be building this entire app programmatically. So there's programmatic layout, launch, and everything. Okay, we're going to be using UI table view. So you're going to see how you can use the UI table view along with core data and core data manager that we're going to create. We're going to be using something called fetched results controller with table view, which is part of core data, but it's sort of like a helper for table views. And it basically does what it does is it makes it easy for you to retrieve and get data for table views. And you're gonna see how easy it is with fetched result controller to query core data. Okay, you're going to see how you can decouple your table views data source and data providers, create data providers for your table view so you can reuse them anywhere. So what we're going to be doing is basically we're going to be creating generic versions of those. So you're going to have generic data provider, generic data source, and generic table. And literally this folder right here, uh, this folder, you can take it anywhere to any other project and drop it, and you would start using it. It says that it's that much decoupled. Okay, the other thing is you're gonna see that how with this approach, how easy it will be basically for us to create these two screens. So these two screens are pretty similar to each other, right? So you're going to see how easy it is. With few lines of code, you're going to be able to actually write both of these screens. Okay, so you're going to see that, and you can see how essentially reuse how you're going to reuse the table view with generic table view. You're going to have generic data provider, and what generic data provider is going to do is it's going to take the responsibility of fetching all the data and connecting with core data and stuff like that. So you're going to see how you can actually do that. And data source also is separated, like I mentioned, and that actually gives you another abstraction layer where you can swap out different data sources for the table view. So you're no longer gonna have your view controller handling your um, your delegate view controller basically doing this delegation, and data source work is basically going to be responsible for separate classes. Okay, that is going to give you an opportunity to create lean view controllers. So your view controller is literally so we're gonna divide our folders according to features. So that's another thing that we're gonna see, like how we can actually clean our project, uh, create a clean structure of our project by dividing features based on different folders, different folders for each feature. Okay, what I want to show you is um, that this is going to be your view controller, which is going to be responsible for a few things, not all the things. And if you notice, your table view is only this part right here. It does not have anything that table view does, like delegates and stuff like that. All that is going to go inside your generic version of the table view. So let's go back to the learning objectives. So you're going to be learning how you can create lean view controllers, and especially in this case of table views, because table views are the one that takes a lot of code to write, and we're going to see how you can simplify that. And code and file organization is one of the other topic, because as your code or your project gets bigger, you get more the code gets more messier, and you have more opportunities to improve upon those. So you're going to see how you can actually do that. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started with our app creation, and we're going to be building everything from scratch. And once again, we're going to be using core data for this. Okay, so, and by the way, this storyboard is just launch screen storyboard. That's why I'm keeping it here. Okay, other than that, there's no use of storyboard in our case. We're going to be doing everything programmatically for the app launch and everything. Okay, all right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started with this project and get going. All right, so what I've done here is I've created an empty project, and while creating the project, what I did is I basically um, made sure that I would select the core data um, as a part of selection. So when you go iOS app, click next. Right here, choose your interface storyboard, and make sure you select use core data. Okay, so that's what I've done, and rest of the steps are same. Basically, create a product, give a product name, your organization identifier, and stuff like that, and save it. Okay, so once you have done that, you will land right here where I am. You can have like your app delegate and scene delegate created, your view controller that comes out of the box created, your main.storyboard, which we are gonna delete in a few, and your launch screen, your info.plist, and um, this to-do list.xc data model, or whatever the project name that you have given, .xc data model file should also be created for you. And right now everything is empty, so we're gonna uh, populate all these in a few, but let's go ahead and do first thing first. We're gonna delete our main.storyboard, so I'm simply gonna say delete, move to trash. Okay, and once it's deleted, we need to make some changes so our app doesn't crash. So go to your project target and from the main interface, remove main. So simply select it and hit backspace or delete button. And then you're going to go into the plist, and you're going to basically look at this application scene manifest, and expand that, expand scene configuration, and expand application session role. And there is a storyboard name right here. You're going to delete that too. So just click on that minus button and it should delete it. Okay, once you have done all that, go ahead and save, and now go to your storyboard. Okay, and we're gonna actually delete even this view controller in a little bit, but let's set up this launch point first. So what we're going to do is we are going to basically, first thing we're going to create is going to be the entry point for our app. So we're going to first create our windows scene. Okay, and window scene is required to basically create a window. So we're going to create UI window. UI window takes window scene, so we're going to supply that window scene, and then we're going to say window dot root view controller is equal to UI navigation controller. We're going to wrap this in navigation controller, and for the root view controller, we are going to use our view controller for now. Okay, and this step is important: make key and visible. So basically our this becomes this view controller inside navigation controller becomes our entry point. Okay, one more thing I'm going to do here, just to know that we are actually loading the right view, I'm going to change this to a blue color background for the view controller, and then gonna launch the app. Okay, so it's gonna launch, and what we should see is a blue color screen. Okay, so there we go. We have a blue color screen where our nav controller set. All right, so that's our programmatic launch. Okay, now what we're going to do is I want to first of all structure our code. Okay, so I'm going to create some folders. So I'm going to create, right click on the main folder, like to-do list project name folder, and click new group. Okay, and I'm going to say app files. Okay, this is where we're going to move all of our app files. So app delegate, scene delegate, and data assets, and info.plist. Okay, now this is a moving info.plist inside a folder is going to give you an issue, and we're going to go ahead and fix it in a minute, because now its path has changed and build setting does not know where info.plist lives anymore. So we can actually fix that in a minute. Let me collapse this, and next we're gonna delete this one. So that's another thing that we're gonna have to come back and fix. So we have a storyboard and our data model. So let's create another group, and next group we're gonna create. We're gonna call this one storyboard. So any storyboards, we're gonna just drop them in here. Okay, we're gonna create another group for, maybe we'll call it DB. Okay, and this folder is also going to contain our core data manager stuff as well. So we're going to come back to that. All right, so there are a few errors that we need to fix. First error, that is basically this view controller does not exist, right? So let me create another folder or another group here, and I'm going to call this one to do folder. So this is going to be folder, list of folder, and all the view controllers and stuff related to that first screen. So I'm going to create a Swift file, and we are going to call this folder list view controller. Okay, and import from UIKit, create a final class folder list view controller, UI view controller. Okay, and on the view did load, super dot view did load. We can set view dot background color to be, let's give orange this time. Go to your scene delegate and can initialize folder list view controller. It's not going to build right now because the info.plist has an error. So let's go ahead and fix that. Not info.plist actually, our project target. So go to your build settings, okay? And under packaging, you have info.plist file, which is listed under to-do list / info.plist. Now we know that that is no longer true because we have another folder in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another slash here, and I'm going to say it's located under app files. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and try to build, and we should be able to build now successfully. And let's go ahead and launch to see if we can get our orange view controller, and we do. Okay, awesome. So that is the initial setup. Let me create a few more folders. So we're gonna have another folder called common, which is gonna have our common view controllers and stuff going in there. And then we're gonna have a generic classes. Now we could have actually moved generic classes stuff inside common, but reason I'm actually creating a separate folder for this is because your generic classes is going to be the folder that's going to contain stuff which you can drop into any other project. So you're going to have like, a sort of like, a distinction between like, what's there that's being utilized inside this project and what's there that can be shared among other projects, or you can create even a Swift package for this for your purposes, or a library for your purposes. So that's why I'm actually creating it right here. Okay, one more. I'm gonna create a new group. We're gonna call this one to do items. So this is basically going to be the other screen, the items screen, and I'm going to keep these two together so we know, like, our features are going inside this. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so our folder structure is set up. Next, we are going to basically create our entities for our data model, and we are also going to create our core data manager, which is going to be interacting with so basically it's going to be initializing your core data and stuff. So so let me show you. This is where your core data is initialized. So I'm going to actually move all these because this is not where we're going to set it up. So I'm just going to simply take this and delete it from here. Okay, like that. So just to clean it up. And for the scene delegate, there's a place where scene delegate actually calls save context when the app enters background. We're going to simply clean that up as well. Okay, while I'm at it, let me remove these because I'm not going to need these. Okay, all right, and do something similar really quickly to clean our project. There's a whole bunch of comments, so we don't need these. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and make sure everything builds again successfully and go ahead and launch it. So everything is looking good. Okay, so next we can actually get this entity populated. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and set up our core data entity. So we're going to click on this and add entity, and we're going to name this first entity folder. Okay, and this folder is going to have two attributes or two columns. One is going to be folder, and it's going to be type string, and another one is going to be title, which is going to be of type string. Okay, so that's going to be the first entity, and second entity is going to be to do, and sorry, let's have only the title in the folder, and for the to do, we're going to have title and folder under which it belongs. So our to do is going to have two columns, folder and title. Okay, and our folder is going to have our title. So I'm not going to overpopulate this. You can extend it further if you like, and you're going to keep it simple because we are exploring the concepts that we are going to learn here. So keep it simple for data. Data manager. All right, so we're going to create core data manager now. Now this core data manager is going to be responsible for setting up our core data and initializing it and also saving stuff. So we're going to first import from foundation is already done. Import from core data. We're going to create final class core data manager. Okay, we're going to have shared instance for this, so we're going to create singleton for this core data manager. Okay, and with that we are also going to prevent this class from being initialized, so we're going to create private init, and this private init is going to initialize the manage object context. So let's create a manage object context var managed object context, and it's manage object context, and we're gonna say concurrency type is gonna be main queue type. Okay, now we're gonna initialize our persistent container, so we're gonna say private lazy var, or I have created a snippet for it, so I'm gonna say POV and it's gonna create that persistent container. Okay, so this container name is the name of your model. So in my case, it's to-do list. It's this part right here. So I'm simply gonna copy this and paste it just so you know which part it is that makes up your container. All right, so I'm gonna take the container and we're gonna load persistent stores. And for the completion handler, we get a few things like a store description, so we're not gonna use it for anything, so just underscore and error if there's any error. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we do want to check for error, so we're gonna say if let error. So if we do get error, we're gonna crash our program because we could not initialize our core data. So there is some issue, and we want to actually we want to initialize, or we want to basically make sure that we don't continue from here because our core data is not being initialized. So you can handle it depending upon how your application behaves. But in my application, this is the sole responsibility for to-do list to have data stores. If it's not there, that means something I won't be able to save stuff. So that's why I want to throw a fatal error here. Okay, so we're gonna simply say unresolved error, error.userinfo. So we get more detail on that. Okay, and so this is our container, and we're going to return container like so. Okay, so now in the initializer, we're going to say manage object context is self.persistence container.view context is the manage object context. So whenever somebody uses core data manager, they can access this persistent containers view context using manage object context property. Okay, next is a function that's going to help us save. So private save context func. We're gonna have context variable from persistence container. So we can use view context to access NS manage object context right here, right? Or you can simply say manage object context. Okay, but since you already have manage object context, you can simply say manage object context dot has changes, right? And you can say if it has changes, then do try manage object context dot save catch if there's any error. And this is going to be another fatal error that I'm going to simply use this. So I'm going to use this guy right here. That's not going to be a question mark. It's going to be ERR as this, and I'm going to post the same like that. Okay, so that's going to basically be our save context, which is going to be called by our other save functions. Now I'm going to write an extension. So this extension is going to be on core data manager. Now reason I'm writing extension, so I could actually, if I want to move it in a separate file, I can do that. But this is going to be saving specific items, right? Specific entities. So for example, save folder is going to be one function which is going to save a folder. So I'm going to simply say save folder function takes name string, and then it creates a folder out of manage object context, and then we set folder.title is equal to the name that's being provided and call save context. Okay, so that's one. And another one is save to do, which is going to expect a folder and to do item, and simply we're going to create a to do. Item and call save context. Okay, all right, so that is our core data manager. All right, so let's see what we have going on. We have, okay, so we should have given it them string type. Um, so I'm going to simply change that type and go ahead and build. Okay, so all the errors are gone. Conditional. Okay. All right, so let's remove this warning. Do this. Okay, let's go ahead and build that again. All the warnings are gone, no error. Okay, cool. So our core data manager is ready. So it's basically only going to be responsible for initializing our core data stack and then a couple of functions. So these you can actually, if you want to make this reusable, you can actually move it into an extension. So core data manager plus extensions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and simply move it out here. And we're going to import core data, right, for better organization of our code. So you have extensions that have uh, all the specific functionalities related to your project, and core data manager is basically where you are um, basically initializing your container and stuff. Okay. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and build again. We cannot call save context because of the internal. Okay. So yeah, we created it that is a private. So let's try internal, and internal actually works. So there we go. So now um, we have our core data manager ready. Okay, so next up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna work on our data provider, data source, and generic table view. Okay, to get our data access ready, and then we're gonna start building out our feature specific stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a data source data provider generic table view. All right, so we're gonna work on our data provider first, which is gonna be basically responsible for providing data. So data provider is gonna be hosting um, or basically connecting with the core data, and it's gonna be using fetch results controller to get access to the data that is stored in core data. Okay, so so one thing I want to point out, or I want to mention before we proceed, is that if you we're going to be using generics in this, and if you have not learned generics, you can still follow along, but for better understanding, there's another course, mastering generics, in Swift, and you can watch that, and that course, reason I'm mentioning here because that course takes you from basic uh, program implementation, why generics are important or why generics are there or exist in Swift, and in that course, I take you from the journey of creating a non-generic object, whether function, class, struct, to a generic version, step by step. So it gives you a full understanding of how you can take your code and convert it into a generic version of that code so you can better utilize it. So all the theory, like ideas behind generics and stuff, is part of that course. So there's no point repeating that. So that's why I would actually recommend watching that video course on mastering generics if you haven't learned about it. With that said, let's go ahead and continue forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this folder right up here so it's in sequence, and I'm going to create a new class here inside my generic classes, and this is going to be a Swift file, and we're going to call this one data provider. Okay, and this data provider is basically going to import core data first of all, Okay, and it's also gonna have a delegate. Now delegate we're gonna need, or we're gonna create to notify any changes that has happened inside our data. So we can actually use fetch result controller. We're gonna be responsible for fetch results controller delegate, and then whatever changes happen we can propagate that using our own delegate. So other objects can subscribe to our delegate instead of, like, knowing about fetch result control and stuff like that. That keeps your core concept of fetch results controller away from your data source and stuff, because if you plan to replace your fetch results controller with something else or your own logic, then you don't have to modify everywhere else. You just modify this one place and you're done with that. Okay, so you're going to create a protocol first, and this protocol is going to be data provider delegate, which is going to be of class type. So class protocol is going to basically um, class type alias is going to inherit, and which is a type alias of any object. This helps us to create a weak reference, and as you know, delegates needs to be weak reference so we don't run into retain cycles. So we're going to create a function did insert item at index path. Okay, it's going to be one function. There's going to be another function did delete item at index path. Okay, all right, so there are going to be these two functions that our delegate is going to have. Then we're going to create our final class, data provider. Okay, like I mentioned, it's going to be a generic type, so it's going to expect a type D, which is of type NS managed object, and this class itself is going to inherit from NS object and NS fetched result controller delegate, because we're going to be using that. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a weak reference to our delegate. So weak var delegate. Okay, and then we're going to create a variable for manage object context. We're also going to create a variable for sort descriptors. Okay, sort descriptors are basically um, this is a class that helps you define the sorting conditions inside your core data. So we're going to be creating ns sort descriptor. Make sure I have done correct. Okay, descriptors. Okay, yeah, that's good. An array of ns sort descriptor. Okay, and we are also gonna create a variable for predicate the where conditions. Predicate ns predicate. Okay, and this is going to be optional because not all queries are going to have where conditions, so we are going to make this as optional. Okay, um, and for the initialization part, we're going to basically call our create our init, and that init is going to expect these three objects. So managed object context, sort descriptor, and its predicate is going to be optional, and by default this value is going to be nil. Okay, and we're going to simply assign these. fix the misspelling, and predicate is equal to predicate, if there's any. We're going to call super.init, and then we're going to call a function that is going to perform fetch. So I'm going to create a function, perform fetch, which is going to fetch data, and when our data provider is created, we're going to call this perform fetch function. Okay. All right, so that's our initialization part. Now we're going to need a request, a NSFetch request, which is going to have sort descriptors and predicates, which we're going to use inside fetch result controller. So fetch request takes a type. So we're going to say our type is going to be T, which is of type NSManage object, right? And this is going to help us create a generic version of request. So we're going to say request NSFetch request entity name. So entity name, we're going to take advantage of string describing instance, and we're going to say it's going to be t.self. That gets us the name of the class itself, and that becomes the entity. So let's see if we create an NSFetch request, a request with type folder, then this guy right here is going to create a string representation with name folder, which is going to be the entity type for this NSFetch request. So entity folder is going to be accessible to the request. Okay, so we're going to use reflection basically to get that. And then we're going to say request dot sort descriptors is equal to whatever sort descriptors that have been passed to us during the initialization. And we're going to check if there is a predicate. Right, so predicate is not nil, then we're going to append that to the predicate of the request, and we're going to return this request like so. Okay, now we're going to have our private lazy bar for fetch result. So this is going to be the fetch result controller. Fetched results controller of type NS fetched results controller. Now this controller, you're going to see that it helps a lot in table view cases. It has various different functions that help you retrieve data for in order to be displayed inside the table views. And we're going to be creating all those helper functions, so you're going to see how it's used. But first, let's create the object. First, results. Once again, this takes a type T, so we're going to create that. And the initializer itself takes the fetch request, so we're going to pass the request. Okay, it takes manage object, so manage object context, we're going to pass that. For section key path name, we're going to pass nil, and cache key, we're going to pass nil. We're also going to make sure that fetch results has a delegate, and we assign ourselves or this data provider to be the delegate for that, and we're going to return the fetch results. Okay. All right, so now this fetch result delegate gives us access to this function that is basically sort of a monitoring of changes, right? So we're going to create or we're going to say controller, and this controller has a function called did change. Okay, so this gives us an opportunity where anything changes, whether it's a delete or insert, then we can actually monitor for those changes. So we're gonna say if type, so we have a type which can be equal to basically this enum, and this enum has delete, insert, move, and update, which is actually exactly what. So move in this case is like, moves the index, move the index, like, if you allow your table view items to be moved, then it can even update that. So these are like, all the things that it can observe changes for. So we're gonna say if the type is insert. Okay, we're gonna say if let. So inserted item gets back in a new index path. So we're gonna say IDX path, new index path, right? If that exists, then we're gonna call our delegate dot did insert item at IDX path. Okay. Um, we're gonna have else if condition where we're gonna say else if type is delete. In that case, we're gonna do the same thing. First, get index path. Now, in case of delete, the deleted index comes inside or gets populated. It's inside the index path right here. This index path. So we're gonna simply say index path, and we're gonna call delegate dot did delete item at index path or IDX path actually, because that has unwrapped value. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this controller is fetch results controller delegate function, and that function helps us observe the changes so we can react to those changes. Now in between we're gonna get few things, we're gonna type few things that are gonna help us better populate our table view. So first of all, perform fetch is going to have a is going to call the fetch result controller. So fetch result controller dot perform fetch. So it has a function called perform fetch, which throws error. So we're gonna say catch let error, and we're gonna print when the error occurs. We're gonna print the error dot localized description. Okay, and this is basically gonna perform the fetch. So we're gonna call this during the initialization, and any other time we need to actually fetch data from the um, from the core data. We're simply gonna call perform fetch. Okay, that's one. Now you need item at certain index path, and this is going to be useful in your table view when you are trying to set the cell, or you're going to select a cell and basically get the information about that selection. Then you're going to need a function. So we're going to create a function object at index, right? And this is going to expect the index path, and it is going to return our type t, okay, which is going to be resolved when we create a concrete version of this data provider, but it's going to return the type t, and we're going to simply return fetched results controller dot object at index path. So that's going to give us the object. Okay, and next, we need a number of rows in section, so we get that information. So we can create a function rows in section. Okay, and we're gonna pass section integer here, and what we're gonna get is an integer count out. And this again is a helper function inside fetch result controller, which has all the sections it has created for your table view, and it's gonna get the section dot number of objects. If this is nil, then we're gonna return 0. That means there is no sorry, rows in section. So this is actually getting number of rows in each section. If there is no row in that section, then we're going to return 0. Now we need another function which is going to return number of sections. So number of sections, and this number of sections is going to return an integer count. So we are simply going to return best self-controller dot sections dot count. If there is none, then we're going to return at least one section. Okay. All right. Now, you also need a delete operation. So basically, delete operation is when you swipe to delete on the table view. That functionality you can handle here as well, and that is also generic. So you can rest assured that all your code is gonna be generic enough to be used in multiple different cases. Delete item at index path, index path. So first we're gonna get the item object at index path. So we get the item. We say manage object context or delete that item, and then we're gonna call our manage object context dot save. Okay, and catch let error print error dot localized description. Okay. All right, so this is going to basically help us with deletion as well. All right, with that, our data provider, our generic data provider, is ready to be used. So next, we're gonna create our data source, which is again going to be generic, but it's going to be using this data provider. So you can see how you can pass that generic type that you received in one object to another to initialize those as well, and that's how we're gonna build upon these generic classes. Okay, so next up is going to be, all right, so let's go ahead and create our data source now. So I'm gonna create a new file, search file, data source. Okay, and this is going to be importing from UIKit and core data. Right, once again, final class data source of type. So this generic type is going to expect few things. Now this is a data source for the table view, so it's gonna ask for, or it needs to know about the cell, if there's any cell. So we're gonna expect a cell, a generic type cell, which is gonna be of type UI table view cell. Is also gonna expect a model, which is gonna be NS managed object. Okay, and this guy is going to be inheriting from NS object, and it's going to be also conforming to UI table view data source. Now remember, just data source, not delegate, right? Going to create delegate inside our generic table view. Okay, so let's ignore this error for a minute, and let's create some properties. So we need cell ID, okay, which is gonna be of type string. We're gonna need data provider, right? That's actually gonna be responsible for providing data. So you're gonna call our data provider. Now when we create a data provider, it needs a type. Now that T that we defined, right? That T is our model. Okay. So we can actually supply our model here. Now, one thing to mention, you could have named this instead of T, you could have named this like, model very well. It's just same. So let me go ahead and do that for consistency. So we don't get confused, like, what is what. So model, and this is another instance. Okay, so we get All right, so this file should be clean of any error, clear of any errors. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go back into our data source, and now the exact same relation. So model that we are receiving is basically going to be the type of this data provider. So that's how you actually sort of supply your types to other generic types. Now we're going to need access to table view, and we're going to create UI table view, and this is going to be optional. So we're going to allow our data source implementer to provide access to table view. So we have basically we are able to insert and delete rows. Reason we are creating it optional because we don't want to create a retain cycle between data source and the table view. So it's going to be optional. So if user does not insert any, when they insert anything and they don't see, they're going to realize hey, something is missing. Okay, so this actually prevents us from getting into that retain cycle problem. Config cell is going to be a closure, and this config cell closure is going to expect cell and model to be supplied. So this gives us an opportunity where we actually can set up our cell and style and everything uh, when we need to. Okay, so what is going on? Okay, I thought there was a issue here. Okay, maybe Xcode is running behind. All right, let's go ahead and create our initializer. So we can expect cell ID of type string. Okay, data provider. So whoever is gonna initialize this, they're gonna also provide us the data provider of type model. They're gonna provide us with config cell, which is gonna be escaping closure with cell and model parameters, and it's gonna return void. Okay, then we're gonna basically assign all these. So cell ID is equal to cell ID, data provider is equal to data provider, config cell is equal to config cell, and we're also gonna call super.init, and we are going to say self.dataprovider.delegate. So this guy is going to be acting as a delegate for data provider as well. All right, so let's go ahead and clear or get rid of these errors first. So number of sections, return data provider dot number of sections. Okay, row number of rows in section, number of rows in section is going to be data provider dot rows in section, and we're going to pass the section ID, which is going to give us number of rows, and cell for row at index path is basically going to be the cell that we're going to create. So we're going to say guard let cell is equal to table view dot dq cell with reuse identifier. So reuse identifier is basically the cell ID that's been passed, and we also gonna set it for the index path, and we're gonna say if we cannot basically convert this cell as cell that's been supplied to us, then return an empty cell. So UI table view cell, an empty cell, return that. So that's going to give us unwrapped object of type cell, which is of type that cell that we have provided during our initialization. Okay, now we're going to get our model. So our data provider has the model by calling this function object at index path, and we're gonna simply pass the index path, and we're gonna call our config cell closure here, which is gonna supply cell and model, and we're gonna simply return the cell here. Okay, now there's one more function that we need. We need commit editing style. So if the editing style is delete, right, then we want to delete item. So we're going to say data provider dot delete item at index path. Okay, so that's going to help us delete. So first set of errors are gone. Now these errors are basically, this error is because we are not conforming to data provider's delegate. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create an extension, data source, data provider delegate, and we're going to implement did insert item, and we're going to call our table view dot insert rows at index path. Animation is automatic. When delete item happens, then we're going to call table view dot delete rows at index path that's been supplied with animation automatic. All right, so let's make sure we have everything for our data source. So we have our properties for setting the cell identifier for a cell, and data provider table view config cell. Okay, we have initialized everything here, and we are providing number of sections, number of rows in section or cell, and our editing style and delegates. Awesome. Okay, so that is our generic data source. Okay, now we're gonna build upon this, and next basically we're gonna build out our generic table view, which is gonna be using this data source. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our generic table. All right, so since we have done most of the work for our data source uh, and data provider, our generic table view is also gonna look a lot simpler. So let's go ahead and create a new file. We're gonna create and call this generic table view. Okay, and we will be importing from UIKit, and we will need import core data. Okay, now I'm going to create final class generic table view. Now this is going to be expecting a cell once again, UI table view cell, and a model of type NSManage object. Okay, now this guy is going to be inheriting from UI table view and UI table view delegate. Okay, so selection and all that stuff is part of delegate. So basically it's going to be conforming to that protocol. Okay, now we're going to create some properties first. So private var cell ID, and we're going to create our cell ID here with string describing, and we're going to take the cell that's been supplied and we're going to use its name as a cell ID. Okay, that class name. We're going to also have config cell closure, which is going to return void. And we're going to have another closure, which is going to be the selection handler. So whenever user selects something, we're going to call that selection handler, and it's going to be a closure. So it's going to give caller an opportunity to respond to that selection as they need to. So we're going to simply call that closure and be done with it by supplying our model, and they can use that model however they want to. And you're going to see it basically being used very soon when we actually build out our table views. Okay, so selection handler is going to be taking a model parameter and going to return void. Okay, now we're going to create our data provider. Data provider of type model. Okay, and we are also going to have a model data source. Now I can't say just a data source because data source is a property that is created inside UI table view base class, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this model data source. It's going to be of type data source, and now this is generic, and this is going to pass the cell and model that we have received while creation of this generic table view. Okay, so it's going to supply those that information to the data source for the initialization purposes. Now we're going to create our data source. Or we can simply return here data source of type cell and model. Okay, and this takes cell ID, so we're gonna pass our cell ID data provider, which is gonna be given to us during the initialization, and config cell closure. Okay, and we're gonna return this data source. Now for the initializer of this generate table view class, we're gonna expect data provider to be passed in, and config cell closure to be passed in. Okay, and we're gonna have another closure here, which is going to be our selection handler. Like so. Okay, now for the initialization part, we're gonna simply say data provider is the data provider that's being passed in. Config cell is going to be the config cell that's being passed in the closure, and selection handler is the selection handler that's being passed in as well. We're going to call super.init, and we're going to call the initializer that takes the frame. We're going to say frame is going to be 0 because we are going to be programmatic layout to lay out our table, and the table style is going to be plain. Okay, so other option is grouped. We're also going to make sure that we actually are the delegate for this table view, and for the data source, we're going to say data source is going to be model data source. So we have actually offloaded that responsibility of doing anything that data source does into a separate class this way. So another class is going to take care of being the data source for this. We are also going to register a cell, so we're going to say cell.register cell. Okay, and we're gonna say cell is going to be cell.self, so whichever cell is supplied to us, we're gonna take itself, its type, and then we can actually register that. For the reuse identifier, it's going to be cell ID. Okay, let's go ahead and fix this. And we're going to leave this as is with fatal error because we know we are not using a storyboard, so we should not hit this point where initializer is called from the storyboard. Okay. So our cell is registered. Now we want to make sure that we uh, disable the constraints, the um, auto resizing mask constraint. So translate auto resizing mask into constraints. We're gonna set that to false because we want to set up our own. We're gonna set up. We're gonna give the opportunity for the creator to set the constraints. Okay. We are also gonna set the table footer view to be UI view, so we don't see empty cells at the bottom when there's no data. And we're gonna say model data source has a table view and property which actually notifies about the insertion and deletion, and we're gonna say that model data source table view is going to be self. So we are setting it right here inside our generic table view, and we're gonna perform fetch. Okay, and this is a function that we're gonna create, which is simply going to perform fetch from the data provider, like so. Okay. All right. One more thing that we want to do is whenever somebody selects a row, we want to call our selection handler. So we're going to say did select. Now this is actually part of UI table view delegate protocol. So we get this access to this did select row whenever somebody selects the a row inside the table view, then this is called. So we want to take advantage of this call, and we're going to say first let's get the object that's been tapped on with index path, supplying index path to our data provider. Then we're gonna use our selection handler and call that closure selection handler, supplying the item that's been tapped on, and we're gonna deselect the row at index path and make it true, like so. Okay, so basically when user selects a row, we're going to call our selection handler. So whatever closure, so this is a closure call, so whatever it is defined inside that closure is going to be called. And we are also supplying the item that's being tapped on, so that way, like, you know, the user of the this table view gets the opportunity to use that model to do something with it, and we're going to actually do that. Next, when we are gonna tap on the folder list, it's gonna launch another view controller. So this is where it's gonna be utilized. All right, with that, this is it. Yeah, this is all of our table view that's basically needed to create a generic table view. And as you can see, how we are building block by block, how we are how we first build the data provider, then which is going to be responsible for getting the data and doing anything that's related to data from core data, and then we built data source, which actually takes that data that data provider has provided and transforms it, like, you know, and converts it for table views use cases, right? So you have, like, you know, all the data source related stuff for the table view, and then your table view itself, which is actually putting those two together to create a generic version of the table view, which also provides you ability for delegate UI table view delegate and a selection opportunity. Okay, this is gonna simplify writing our table views tremendously, and you're gonna see, like, you know, how easy it's gonna be to write our table view. So that's gonna be next. We're gonna start working on our feature view controllers. So next step is gonna be the folder list view controller that we're gonna take first, and then to do items. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and so I'm gonna leave common for now, and let's go ahead and um, get our folder list view controller populated. So when we actually initially created, that was our launch point. So we had like the orange background and stuff. So we're gonna remove that, and we are also going to import from core data because we're gonna be supplying our our model from this folder model from this view controller. Okay, so first thing first, we're going to create our table view. So private lazy var table view generic table view. Now this is where we're going to start resolving those t types, those model and cell generic types. This is where we're going to start creating a concrete type for this. Now we're going to need a cell, right? A cell that is going to be displaying the data. So I guess even before we do this, I want to create a new file. So instead of creating a UI table view cell and then converting it, showing you that and converting it, we're directly gonna create our table view cell. So we're gonna create a new file. I'm gonna call this folder table view cell. All right, UI kit. Okay, UI table view cell. It's gonna inherit from that, and it's gonna expect a model. Model is gonna be of type folder. Okay, and it's going to be an optional with an observer set, which is going to be observing for changes. So whenever this object is set, we're going to say if we can resolve a folder, that means model has something, right? Then we want to set those properties inside. So this is going to make it easy for us to sort of populate our fields. Now we're going to create individual labels and stuff, UI elements here now. So we're going to say folder title UI label. Okay, right. So UI label. Okay, we're going to set our folder title dot text here. Folder dot title. Okay, and some properties that we're going to set. First of all, let's set the constraints, auto resizing constraints to false. I'm going to set the font. I'm going to give it 16 size with bold. For the text color, I'll say it's going to be dark gray. And number of lines is going to be set to 0. So it can wrap lines around it, and then cell can auto resize. Okay, so we're going to override the init, and we're going to use the version that takes a style and reuse identifier. First, we're going to call super.init. With style passing in style and reuse identifier. Let's fix this error, and we're gonna call something called setup view. Okay, setup view is gonna be a function that's going to be setting up the view, and this function is going to call another function, setup constraints. Okay, and that is right there. Okay, so setup view is simply going to take our content view and add a sub view in that, which is going to be the folder title. Okay, setup constraint is going to set the constraints on this. So once again, I've created another snippet for ease, but it's essentially NSLayout constraints dot activate takes an array of constraints. So this is where we're going to add our constraints, and we're going to simply say folder title dot leading anchor dot constraint equal. So use the one that takes constant content view dot leading anchor 16 points. I'm going to copy that and paste it 4 times. This is going to be trailing anchor. Now trailing anchor, it takes a negative value. Trailing and bottom takes negative value. So then we're going to be top anchor. So this is going to be content view top anchor 16, or let's change to 8. Okay, and top and bottom we're going to keep it 8. So negative 8. And this is going to be the bottom anchor and bottom anchor. Okay, so this is all there is to our cell. We are going to simply have one label. That's it. Now let's go back. And I'm going to hit Control Z for the deleted stuff. Basically, we are creating our generic table view, and this generic table view expects a cell and a model. So we're going to say our cell is going to be folder table view cell that we just created. Model is going to be the folder. So we want to show the list of folders right here. Okay, and then we're gonna first create our sort descriptors, and that's sort descriptor, and this descriptor takes key. So we know that our folder model has a key called title, so I want to sort my items based on that. So we're going to simply say the key by which we're going to sort is going to be title. Ascending is going to be true. And then we're going to have our data provider, which is going to be data provider of type folder, right? And this data provider initializer takes the manage object context. So we're going to say core data manager. Remember, we created that shared instance. We're going to access the manage object context from that. And we're going to supply that to our data provider along with our sort descriptors that we have. Okay, so this is where we have created our data provider. Now we're going to create our generic table view. So generic table view, once again, folder table view cell, and model type is folder. And this guy takes a data provider and has 2 closure calls. Okay, so we're going to use that. We're going to say the data provider is the data provider that we created just now on line 10. And whenever this cell is ready to be configured, we are going to receive a cell object and a basically folder, right? So folder object. So what we're going to do is we're going to say cell.model is equal to that folder. Okay, so we're going to supply that folder item right there. All right, next we are going to have a selection handler, which is going to be giving us an opportunity whenever user selects a table view. So we're going to simply say weak self here and we're going to get access to the folder object itself. And we're going to simply say guard let strong self. So we're going to unwrap the self, and we're going to also get the folder title, folder.title. If we can't do any of those, then we're going to simply return from here. Now we're going to call basically a strong self and push a new view controller. So right now I'm just simply going to say print your folder name, folder title, like so. And we're going to come back and launch folder items view controller here. Okay, so let's mark it what to do. All right. Okay, so last thing we need to do is return that view. Okay, so that's going to return our generic table view. Okay. Um, Now we also going to need add button stuff, so we can basically get that um, going. Okay, so because we need to be able to add items, so we can see actually if we are adding something, it becomes visible, like it's stored in the database and then becomes visible on the table. So we can simply create a button, and this is going to be fast action button, so it's going to be on the uh, bottom right corner. So let's call this add new button, UI button. Okay, it's gonna basically, let's create a config for UI image dot symbol configuration. Now the symbol configuration, it takes size, point size, so we're gonna say 32.0 and bold configuration to access SF symbols, and we're gonna, based on these configuration, we're gonna access the SF symbol. So system name, we're gonna use plus symbol with configuration defined in config. Okay, we're gonna set the image for the view, and the image is going to be the image that we just created for normal state, and we're gonna set the tint color to be white, set the background color to be blue, and we are also gonna change the corner radius. So I want to create a leaf style. I've seen a lot of rounded corner um, fast action buttons or fabs. So let's create something different. So masked corners, layer min x min y corner, and layer max x and max y corner. What this is going to do basically is going to create a is going to only round two corners, so sort of like going to create a leaf kind of like a button. Okay, we're going to add target to this. Target is going to be self, and this target is going to allow us to add an item into the database. So let's simply say add object c private func add new item, or we're gonna call this did tab new, and sender is going to be UI button, and we're simply going to call core data manager. We have on the shared instance, we have a function called save folder that takes a name, and we're going to simply supply the oh, actually, sorry. So add new item is going to launch a view controller that's gonna give us an opportunity to um, add the label and stuff. That's going to be a common view. So let's hold on to this, and let's put a to do here, and we're gonna call add new view controller here. Okay, selector is going to be did tab new, touch up inside is going to be the action. Okay, all right. So that is our add new button. Now we are going to call a setup view function, which we don't have. So let's go ahead and create that. And I don't need any of these. And we're going to call setup constraints inside this, which is going to be another function. And Let's go ahead and mark these as private because we don't want to expose these two for anyone else. We're going to be only one who are calling this. Okay. And one thing we want to also do is perform fetch. So when this table view is ready, we're going to call generic perform fetch from generic table view, which eventually is going to call data providers perform fetch. Okay. All right. So we're going to perform the fetch here. Now setup view is going to set the title. So I'm going to call this my list. You can call it whatever you want to call it. We're also going to add two subviews. So there's going to be a table view that we're going to call and add new button. Okay. Then we're going to call setup constraints. And setup constraints is basically going to be NS layout or NS constraints thing right here. So we're going to set up the table view constraint first. So table view. And we want our table view to take cover the entire screen. So you're going to say constraint is going to be equal to view dot leading anchor. And I'm going to copy this and paste this 4 times like so. And we are going to have trailing anchor, top anchor, and bottom anchor like so. Okay. So this is going to set up our table view. So let's mark this table view setup and then add new button. And this is where add new button is going to go. So add new button dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to view dot trailing. We just want trailing with 16 points. And what I'm going to do is for the bottom anchor, we're going to constrain to safe area layout safe area layout guide dot bottom anchor and -16 for that too. Okay. Now, other than these two, we're going to need width and height. So we're going to say width anchor is going to be constrained to a constant, and I'm going to say 44 is the width that I want, and I'm going to copy and paste this because I just need height anchor changed here. It's going to be also 44. Okay, so our tap add button is going to be tapped, and that's when we're going to launch our add new table view controller. So we can't run it yet. Okay, so we need one more view controller, which is going to be our common view controller. So that we're going to populate this folder now, where we're going to create a common view controller, which is going to have a way for us to add a new item. Okay, and reason it's going to be common because we're going to be using same view controller to create not only the folder but items inside the folder as well. So we're going to be reusing that. All right, so that's going to be that's what we're going to be doing next. All right, so let's go ahead and fill that gap. So we're going to create a common view controller, and this view controller we're going to call add new item view controller. Okay, now add new item view controller is first of all is going to be importing from UIKit and core data. Okay, and it's going to have a protocol for the caller to know that an item has been added. So basically save that item. Okay, this will give us an opportunity to basically save either a folder or an item, and you're going to see how actually if it sounds confusing. Add new item view controller delegate class, and we're going to create save new item string. Okay, this is going to be the function. I'm going to create final class, add new item, UI view controller. First, we're going to create our delegate, weak reference to our delegate. And then we're going to create a title label first. Or just call it add new. Okay. Then we're going to have title field. So this is going to be a text field, UI text field. Okay. UI text field. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's going to be our text field. You can create a placeholder as well. So you can add a placeholder text, add new item, like that. Okay. Okay. We're also going to need a save button. Okay, so we're going to add a target to ourselves with selector. Okay, and touch up inside. Okay. And we're going to set the background color to be blue. Okay, so let's create this this function, selector function. So add c private func save item. We're gonna first put a guard let statement to extract the text out of text field. So call it title field text. Okay, we also want to make sure that text is not empty. Okay, if any of those cases are there, then we're going to return from here. Now we're going to call our delegate dot save new item with text in it, and we're going to dismiss our view controller as well. And we're going to simply say did tab save name did tab save. Okay, All right, so all of our controls are created. So we are simply going to now call setting these up on the view and the constraints. So we did load super dot view did load setup view, and this is going to call setup constraints. Now here we are going to first set our views background color to be white, and we're gonna take our title label. We're gonna take our title field, and we're gonna take our save button, put them in for each, and because all of them inherit from view, we take the advantage of that and we simply call add subview view. We don't need to know what kind of view it is because we are just adding it as a subview over the view. Okay. All right. So setup constraint for title label, and as constraints title label dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to view dot leading anchor with constant 16 points. Okay. For the title label dot trailing anchor, we're gonna say it's view dot trailing anchor constant -16, and then title labels top anchor constraint equal to view dot top constraint and 16 point from top. Okay. Or you can actually make it 32 from top as well. Okay, so that's all for title label. Next is title field, the text field, and title field so leading and trailing are going to be same as text label. Its top is going to be different because top is going to start where the title label's bottom is. Okay, so 8 points from there. So top anchor constraint is going to be constrained to title label. Sorry, this is title field. Title label dot bottom and 8 points of gap in between. For the button, we're gonna build upon the same idea where buttons leading and trailing are going to be same as the views. So with 16 points of difference, I'm going to simply copy that and I'm going to say this is add new or save button. Yeah, save button. Save button dot leading and trailing. Okay, and for the top, save button dot top anchor is going to be constrained to your title field dot bottom anchor, and we're going to give it a 16 points of gap, right? And save button is also going to have height anchor, and we're going to constrain that height to a constant, which is going to be 50. Okay. All right. With that, our add new table view is ready to be used. So now what we can do is we can go back to our folder list view controller, right? And in the folder list view controller, first to do is basically whenever user has selected something, um, that's actually the one where we launch the list of items at the folder. So we're not going to populate that. Let's see another to do. right here. Okay, so whenever the add new is called, basically we need to um, launch add new table view controller. So when the new is tapped, we can simply say let EC or view controller is add new item view controller. Okay, and add new item view controller is going to have a delegate, which is going to be self. Okay, and then we're going to present view controller animated true completion nil. Now we want to make sure that we actually conform to that uh, delegate, because we are saying that this folder list view controller is going to be conforming to the delegate. So we're going to simply say extension folder list view controller add new item view controller delegate, and we're going to simply say save new item, so we get access to the new item, and we're going to call our core data manager shared instance here to save folder, and we're going to pass the item, and we're also going to call table.perform fetch right here. Okay, right. So okay, so now actually let's go ahead and launch this, and what we should see is a add button. So we have made a mistake in trailing anchor, so let's go ahead and fix that. So add new button, save area. Okay, so trailing is all right. Now let's see, view dot trailing. Okay, go ahead and make it 16. Yeah, it didn't make sense that it should have 16. Okay, so let's see. Add new button leading is add new button dot trailing anchor is the trailing anchor. Okay, now it is going to be perfect. Okay, because I was setting leading anchor and setting the trailing um, property for the view -16, which is wrong. So add new buttons trailing anchor should be equal to views trailing anchor. That's why we're gonna have this. Okay, so if I click on this, we should get this add new. Okay, so I'm gonna say grocery. Okay, that's going to be my first list, and there we go. We have our grocery list created, right? And if I select on it, our grocery is printed in the selection handler. Okay, so let me close this. Let's add another one. Work. Okay, so now next, basically what we need to do next is put this to-do list item in place, and you're gonna find it like very much similar to what we did with the list view controller, because um, most of the um, most of the stuff like setting up the generic table view and stuff like that, that is all taken care of. So next we're gonna create our to-do list item view controller. All right, so let's go ahead and create our to-do list item, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file here. First we're going to create our cell, so to do table view cell. Okay, and import from UI kit. So its model is going to be to do, and we're going to have an observer. So we're going to create to do title UI label. All right, so that's going to be our title, to do title. So we're going to simply say to do title.text is equal to item.title. Okay, and then we're going to have our initializer. Okay, and this is going to call setup view. Okay, awesome. So for the setup view, we're going to simply have content view dot add subview to do title, and for the constraint, so for trailing anchor, top anchor, bottom anchor. Trailing is going to be -16, top is going to be 8, and bottom is going to be -8. All right. Okay, so this is our cell, and now we're gonna create our controller. So to do list, to do list view controller, right? Once again, this is going to be the UI kit, import UI kit, final class. Okay, we're gonna get the folder from the selection, and we're gonna create our own initializer to expect a folder to be supplied when this view controller is created, and we are going to say self.folder is equal to folder, and also going to call super.init with nib as nil and bundle as nil, because we are not initializing using storyboard. Okay, let's fix the required error required initializer, and now we are going to create our table view. So table view, generic table view. This time we're going to supply to-do list, to-do table view cell. Okay, and we're going to supply a different model, and as you can see, our generic table view is already paying off, because now our model is different, our cell is different, but we still are able to utilize that generic table view. So, and as sort descriptor, so let's give that sort descriptor, and this time we want to sort. Um, let's sort with title as well, right? In this case, I have the same property name, so I'm gonna sort with the same. But if you have like more properties you have added, like created date and priorities and stuff like that, then you can have those too. Let's create a predicate, and as predicate, I am going to use the predicate this time, and I'm going to use folder. So I'm going to say folder is equal percent at. Okay, and we're going to supply the folder right there. Now we're going to create data provider to do. Okay, and this data provider takes manage object context, so we're going to say core data manager dot shared dot manage object context, give that, and sort descriptor, give that, and we are also going to pass the predicate. Okay, now we're going to create our generic table view to do this, to do table view cell, and model is to do. Okay, and data provider, we're going to supply data provider that we just created. For the config cell, we're going to get the cell and to do back, right? So we are simply going to say cell dot model is our to do that we have received, and for the selection handler it's going to be to do. So here I'm simply going to print this. Ideal case, you can have user mark this as done to do or delete it on selection, whatever you want to do with it. I am just going to print this, and I'm just going to print this item selected. Okay, so this gives you a variation, like, you know, that you can have different selection handlers, selection handler closures for different view controllers. All right. Okay, so let's have our add button. So you're gonna have that add button, that fab or fast action button here as well. So configuration. Now there is a challenge hiding here for you. Now we are repeating these, so the challenge, if you are willing to take, is basically generalize this add new button as well. Okay, once again, check out the course on generics to see how you can convert a normal function or normal class into a generic class and apply the same learnings to create a generic button, generic label, stuff like that, right? selector. You're gonna have our selector, and the action is gonna be touch up inside. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that selector. Okay, whenever the add is called, we wanna basically call the same view controller, add new item, view controller, right? We're gonna set ourselves as a delegate for that view controller, and then present. Okay, so we're gonna make sure first we're gonna set this. So we can say did tap add, okay, and extension on to do list or add new item delegate, save new item. Okay, and we are going to call core data manager.share.save. This time to do folder, we already know which folder it is, item we are getting, and we're going to call tableview.perform fetch, like so. Okay, so that error should go away. Now all we need to do is set up our view. Okay, so we're gonna have view did load, super.view did load, set up view. We are also gonna call tableview.perform fetch here because whenever the view is loaded, we want to find out if there's anything that's saved in the database, then we want to fetch that. So private func setup view, and this is simply going to set the title as the folder name first, view dot add subview table view, and view dot add subview add new item. Okay, and we're also going to call setup constraints, and leave a line of space here so we know something different is happening. Private func, and now we're going to set up our constraints for the table view. So ns constraints table view dot leading anchor constraint is equal to view dot leading anchor, and okay, so we have our leading, trailing, top, bottom, okay, and so this is our table view, and next is our add view. So we are only going to be setting trailing anchor once again, and view dot trailing anchor constant -16, add new dot bottom anchor constraint is equal to view dot safe area layout guide dot bottom anchor constant is going to be -16, add new item dot width anchor is going to be constrained to a constant 44, and height anchor is going to be same. All right, okay, so one last thing, whenever we tap a folder, we want to launch the detail for that folder. So go back to your folder list view controller and find that to do that we had to launch the folder items view controller, right? Now here we're going to use our strong self, and I'm going to remove this, and we're going to say navigation controller dot push view controller, right? To do list view controller, and this takes a folder name, so we're going to supply the folder title here and animate it. We're going to say it is true. Okay, now let's run for one more time, and there we go. Yeah, grocery and work. If you go in the grocery, this is our grocery list, and we don't have anything, so let's get something so we can have some grocery items. Yeah. Okay, so milk and bread. Now you remember those delete functions that we wrote? We never wrote it anywhere else. Once we added inside our data source. So yeah, this delete item editing style, right? And inside our data provider, the delete item function, and like these controllers whenever something changes, right? That is now coming to us for free. So if we add in any view controller, like we add something, right? If we want to delete, the delete operation is same, like it's deleted from this from that list, and we didn't have to write anything specific to that view controller. Okay, and when you tap an item, that item gets selected. If I press work, there's nothing, so I'm gonna add it like something like record video or something, right? Just for something to do. And as you can see, you are only showing items related to that particular list. All right, so with that, we have built out a to-do list app, and we have learned a whole bunch of things along the way, but more than important, like we learned how to better manage our code by creating these generic classes that help us along the way to not repeat the overly used functionalities like delete, insert, and all those things. All right, so that was it for this course. Thanks again for sticking around and finishing this. Congratulations, and I will see you guys in another video course. Thank you.